I think we'll get going. So first up, we have Anatoly. Anatoly has been with Atlassian for 7 years. He's currently our development manager at Confluence. He's a passionate advocate for Agile and loves helping teams adopt Agile. So this is his first time speaking at Summit, and I hope you guys join me in welcoming Anatoly.
Hi guys, glad to be here. Just want to emphasize I've got a very broad topic and I'm sure you have a lot of questions about it. Just go to this URL, ask the questions. If we have time at the end of the talk, I'll answer those questions live. If we don't have enough time, I'll promise I'll come back and I'll tab the answers, and yeah, this way we'll get the most benefit out of the talk. All right, looks like everyone is here, so let's start. Supposed to be working, but it doesn't. I'll do this. All right, my topic today is spiking your way to improved agile development. But before I start talking about the topic, let me introduce myself. My name is Anatoly. I'm a development manager in Confluence team. I've been developing software professionally for the last 12 years, and in my last 7 years in Confluence, I shipped more than 20 major and more than 50 minor versions of Confluence. But at the same time, I'm still learning how to develop and ship better versions of Confluence. It's a process, so I'm always trying to improve. So my topic is about spiking in agile environment, and it's important to establish the common understanding what I mean when I say agile. So let's start with the question, what is agile? Agile is a large list of software development methods that help you to ship useful software. Some of those methods, like development backlog and estimates and velocity tracking, are well established and well adopted by a lot of companies. Other methods, like pair programming, is less widespread. Some of those techniques can be very useful for your team. Some may provide more overhead than benefits. So you probably have the definition about all those techniques and methods, so I'm not going to go through them one by one, but I just want to mention that you have to imagine what are the most important methods for your team. So you need to measure it somehow. And for me, the measuring stick is for the most important practices comes from the first principle of Agile Manifesto that says that customer satisfaction by rapid delivery of useful software is paramount. So if technique helps you to deliver useful software faster, if your customers are satisfied, that's a good technique, you should employ it. If it just provides overhead for you, just throw it away. So with this in mind, I looked through the techniques that my teams are practicing, and I came up with the top 5. And this top 5 includes spikes, short sprints, demos, dogfooding, and frequent shipping. And today I'll be talking about the technique that's on top of my list, which is spikes. So spikes comes from analogy to rock climbing. When climbing, we might stop to drive the spike into the rock face. Driving the spike is not the actual climbing. It doesn't propel you further to the top, but rather it provides the safety, it enables the future climbing, and it provides confidence for the future climbing. Spiking in software development is analogous to that. Spike is a story or a task aimed at answering the question or gathering information. As a result of the spike, you're not going to produce a shippable code. You will just get more knowledge and more understanding on what you will produce later. So the obvious question, if you're not producing any shippable code, why are you doing it? Like, is it a waste of time or not? Well, there are quite a few benefits, and the most obvious one, better estimates. How many times where software developers would come up with over-optimistic estimates, and at the end we'll figure out that it's not realistic at all? Well, this is because estimation is a very difficult task. Sometimes you just don't know every single task that is involved in developing a story. Sometimes you just don't know what parts of the systems will be affected when you're developing a story. And that's where running the spike is a good idea. You'd be able to estimate better, you'll be able to control your development better in the future. So that's the best and one of the most obvious benefits of spiking. The next benefit is clearing up requirements. This is the snippet of the typical requirement documents that we have in Confluence. I actually copied this screenshot from Confluence. It has this big section on open questions. And in Agile environment, this open questions in requirements document is a typical thing. And sometimes you don't have them explicitly listed. Sometimes you read the whole document and you have the list of those questions in your mind. So the first thing to do is to answer those questions in a spike. Before the actual development, you'll be able to adjust if needed, and you will not waste the time later on. And if you find out that the question that was posed in this requirement document made the development much more difficult. So eliminating unknowns is another big benefit of spiking. Every solution looks perfect on paper. When I design a feature, I always think that I covered every single case. But when I start developing, always, and this is no exceptions, I'll find that something that I missed, I haven't thought through, and that's where the spiking will help. Run the spike to find those gaps, and they will be both functional gaps and technical gaps, and address them early. Another less obvious benefit of spiking is definition of the scope. How many times we would start with the grand story in mind with a lot of features and scope, and then when delivery comes closer and closer, you would push things out of scope. Well, run the spike to figure out whether it's possible to actually deliver everything that you committed to early in the project. It will help you planning. Find out if it's too difficult to do in the spike and push it out early in the project. It also works the other way around. Sometimes you do the development and you find that a spike, and then you find that a particular feature would be very easy to implement. You talk to your product manager and you say, look, do you think we should do it? It will only take a day or half a day to implement, and they'll be really grateful if you ask them this kind of question, and they'll definitely pull stuff into the scope. Validating chosen technical approach. This should work. It's a catchphrase of every technical discussion. And most of the time it does work. However, when team or a person who develops a feature is less certain of an approach, spike will help. It will validate the technical path and you will end up with a proven solution. You're not going to waste time further when you're doing the development if you have the validated technical approach. Another great benefit of a spike is that comes from the ability to split the work into tasks. Spike will help to organize the delivery. Usually it's the whole team that implements a feature, and you need to be able to parallelize the work to split one big task into smaller ones. Run the spike, figure out how you can implement this feature with smaller things. Sorry?
Sorry, is your video connector weird or something like that? We're getting flickering.
Ooh, okay. Hang on. Give me a sec. It looks all right here.
Okay.
Well, guys, can you help me?
It should work.
Exactly, it should work. It's a hardware problem there. Oh, damn it. Sorry guys, some technical difficulties.
It's that experience at the first talk.
Yeah, I know.
All morning, fine.
Oh, damn. Okay, does it work? Let me know if it starts flickering again, and I'll stop and try. Okay. Okay, that should work now. No. It's the connector, I reckon.
I think it's on this end.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I'll keep going. If it starts flickering again, let me know and I'll stop. So, splitting work into tasks. If you run the spike, you'll find the opportunities to parallelize the work. It's the whole team that runs the feature. And you'll find out whether you can deliver the feature incrementally. Also very important things. So the takeaways for the benefits is that you get better estimates, you've got refined requirements, you eliminate any unknowns when you run the spike, you validate the technical approach, and you get a better organized and planned tasks. Okay, so these are the benefits. But when do you run the spike and how do you do it? Whether you're trying to add support for a new type of database or for existing application, or adding a feature for existing application, the proper place to start is spiking. Almost any task is actually good for spiking. If it's a technically difficult task, if it's an integration story, and especially if it's a time-critical task where the accurate time estimate is very important, spike is a prime candidate to start. And when I look at, oh damn it, it's.
Do you want to try another connector, or?
I think it's over there, actually, on the other side. So. Guys, any help from the other side? Okay.
Your laptop, I'll see it.
Yeah, there's so many connectors on this side, I'm afraid to unplug them. And this, yeah, I've got the monitor over here, and it flickers as well. Oh.
Do you want an iWatch?
Pardon?
Do you want an iWatch?
Nah, no, I don't think they actually sell it yet.
They didn't spike it.
Yeah, that's exactly the reason why we should spike. Okay, here we go. It looks all right. So the indicators for the spike. If spec has a lot of questions, run the spike. If you're working with a new library, new code, unfamiliar part of the system, again, a lot of risks, run the spike. If you have implementation uncertainties, run the spike. If you have a new team, if the team cannot agree about approach or estimation during the planning meeting, spike is a prime starting point. Once you decided that spike is needed, the first thing to do is to establish the spike goals. Every spike has different goals. Some answer technical questions, some are about accurate estimates. So create a page with the goals and explicitly list what you want. Whether you want estimates, whether you want to split a story into a list of tasks, whether you want to evaluate different approaches, whether you want to, at the end of the spike, whether you want to have a demo or not. And in Confluence, we use the decision blueprint quite a lot, especially for technical spikes. When we want to decide which approach to take, the decision blueprint already provides you with a blueprint, and like you list the advantages and disadvantages, and at the end of the spike, you make a decision on a technical approach. It's also important to treat the spike as a proper task. Spike will take time and affect the velocity of the sprint, so create a task for it. Additional benefit is that you'll be able to link the task to the page with the goals of the spike, and you will be able to, for a person who actually implements a spike or runs the spike, they will see the goals there, and even if they were not present when the goals were defined. So you literally would be on the same page. And time box it. in order to make spike goal-oriented time boxes, the risk is that you would not explore end-to-end solution. You'll be stuck on a particular part of it. So put the time constraint on it and make the spike more goal-oriented. And introducing the time constraint will make sure that you will explore the solution end-to-end. And try to plan forward. If you have a feature that you are planning to implement 2 sprints ahead, and you know that spike will be needed, schedule the spike in the next sprint. Sometimes it's actually not possible to plan forward, and it happens with me quite a bit. Don't be afraid of unplanned spikes. If during the planning meeting you start arguing about the approach of the feature that you are going to implement during this particular sprint, push it out of the sprint. Pull in the unplanned spike, create a task for it, and pull it into the current sprint. It will save you time in the long run. It will make sure that you are not pursuing the dead end. So in order to run the spike, the first thing to do is to establish and write the spike goals, schedule the spike as tasks in the sprint, and time box the spikes. But even knowing how to do it and what the benefits are, it's still difficult to actually jump into spiking straight away. So here, let me just give you some tips and tricks that I employ when I'm running the spike. First of all, you're probably doing spike already, even if you don't treat them as explicit tasks. When you're writing a technical requirement document, chances are you're diving into the code, you're trying to figure out what tasks are involved. If you are an architect and you're designing a big system, you need to figure out what technology you should use. So you're, again, diving into these technical spikes of figuring out what would be the most appropriate technology. Even if you're an engineer and you're working on a big task, the first hour, 2 hours, half a day, you try to scope the solution from start to end before diving into details. So if you're doing it implicitly, why don't you dedicate a proper time and proper task and do it explicitly? One thing that we started doing originally, we started dedicating half a day before the planning meeting exclusively for spikes. So we knew what the next stories in the planning meetings will be scheduled, and we will ask people on the team to actually spike those stories beforehand. And again, we plan and schedule spikes as normal tasks in a sprint. So when we are going to the planning meeting, we're dragging spikes into the planning. And some of the typical mistakes to avoid is production code. It's not uncommon and to find unforeseen problems halfway through the development. And spikes are designed to eliminate such unforeseen problem by exploring end-to-end solution. Avoid the typical mistake of not covering the breadth of the feature when you're doing a spike and concentrating on code quality. Don't build a shiny and perfect half bridge without understanding what's on the other side. Write just enough of the hacky code to explore end-to-end solution. So that's what you're supposed to be striving for, end-to-end solution. And in order to do that, specify deliverables, the most important thing. Just go back and see what needs to be delivered in the spike. And for a person who implements it, go back to the deliverables every so often just to know not to concentrate on something that is not part of the deliverables. And put the demo as the part of the deliverables, because it's really important, especially for visual spikes. And whether it's visual spike or technical spike, do a demo at the end. It will help you to actually figure out whether spike went well, whether you should adjust for the next spike, whether spiking in general is a good idea for you, or you should be adjusting it and write prototypes instead of doing spiking. And when spike went well, it's very tempting to start building on top of the code that you wrote in the spike. Remember that it's a throwaway code. So throw it away and use the knowledge that you gained in the spike and use it for the foundation of the proper solution. Make sure that it's a maintainable solution, and usually the code in the spike is not maintainable at all. And the last thing is that every team is different. So run retrospective, figure out which types of spikes are more appropriate for you, which goals work well. So for me, for example, visual spikes are the most appropriate because visually everything changes all the time. Technical spikes come next. And for you, it might be something different. Maybe it's technical spikes, validating technical approaches would be most appropriate. Run the retrospectives on the spike, figure out what's the most important for you, and adjust. So sorry about all the problems that we had before, and now I'll try to take questions. I still have 50 seconds.
Hey everyone. So unfortunately, we are not going to be able to take questions live because we were running late and everyone's already waiting outside. But Anatoly will be answering all those questions that are on Confluence questions. So if you guys have anything else, please put them on there. We'll get them answered within the day. And thank you so much. Thanks, Anatoly.
Thank you, guys.